Today we are looking at a case that happened towards the end of the 19th century, so sit back as we go to the USA. Maggie Thompson was born on the 23rd of October 1881 in St. Louis in Missouri, but in 1888 she moved with her parents to Cleveland in Ohio. At the time, Cleveland was a city of remarkable growth and opportunity, fueled by booming steel, oil and manufacturing industries. Its expanding factories, strong rail and trade routes, and its reputation for industrial employment attracted people from many parts of North America who were drawn by its promise of progress and economic advancement. The Thompson family lived at number 24 Merchant Avenue in Cleveland's South Side, near the Tremont School, where little Maggie studied. Mr. Jacob Thompson worked as a brakeman on the railroad. This was demanding work that kept him away from home for long hours, while his wife cared for their 3 children, Maggie, Charlie aged 4, and a baby not yet 3. Maggie was a bright, gentle child, known in the neighborhood for her dark eyes and cheerful manner. On Thursday, the 9th of May 1889, she went to school as usual, and at 11 o'clock she made her way home for lunch. As she did, she chatted with friends and stopped to watch one of them try out a new tricycle. When they parted ways at the corner of Fairfield Street and Merchant Avenue, Maggie turned to walk the short distance back to her house. By midday, however, she had not appeared at the dinner table, and Mrs. Thompson began to worry. She checked the yards, then the streets, but Maggie was nowhere to be seen. She went outside calling her name, and neighbours came out to see if they could help. As afternoon classes resumed, Mrs. Thompson made inquiries at the school, but the teachers told her that Maggie had left when classes ended at 11 and had not returned. So with no sign of her daughter, Mrs. Thompson contacted the police. Within 3 hours of the alarm being raised, the entire city force was searching for the missing girl. Railway stations were closely watched, streets were patrolled, and every possible lead was investigated. A report emerged that at 1 p.m. a woman was seen leading a child resembling Maggie across the Central Way Bridge towards the east side of the city. The information was given to a bridge keeper by a young girl who claimed to know Maggie personally. However, despite this, no trace of the child or the mysterious woman was found. When Mr. Jacob Thompson came home and learned of his daughter's disappearance, he immediately went out searching for her and was joined by his colleagues and friends from the depot. A telegraph boy at the Lakeshore Railroad office in the Union Depot, named James Campbell, told the police that at approximately 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, the day of Maggie Thompson's disappearance, he had seen a stout woman in front of the depot with a boy and a little girl of about 7 years of age. He said that the woman was dressed entirely in black and carried a brown satchel, and the girl appeared to be unwell and was crying. He added that the woman purchased candy for her to try and keep her quiet. The police looked at that lead, but as Maggie had been in good health when she was last seen, they considered that it was improbable that she would have fallen ill in such a short time, but nevertheless they pursued the reports. Over the next few days, the search continued without success, and the Thompson home became a place of deep distress and constant movement. Friends, neighbours and relatives came and went at all hours, bringing with them little bits of news, fresh rumours, or simply their sympathy. Many had spent long hours looking around the nearby streets, rail yards and riverbanks, since word first spread that little Maggie had not returned home. On Saturday, the 11th of May, a meeting was held at the Jennings Avenue Church, where local people expressed additional ways to try and find the missing child. Everyone in attendance expressed deep sympathy for the Thompson family and agreed that every member of the community had a duty to do all they could to help locate the little girl. The meeting ended with a resolution authorizing Chief Schmitz to offer a $100 reward to anyone who could provide information leading to Maggie Thompson's recovery, whether she was found alive or deceased. Over the following weeks, newspapers carried little beyond the rumors circulating in the city. Some reports claimed that Maggie had been seen in Cincinnati, others in Pittsburgh, and some suggested that she had been taken to Ontario in Canada. For Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, however, these were agonizing days, filled with uncertainty and fear, as they had no idea what had become of their daughter. a woman living on the south side of the city, reported to police that an Italian peddler carrying a basket of cheap jewellery had called at her house, and as he was leaving, he spoke to her young daughter. She said that when she asked her child what the man had said, the child replied that he had offered her some pretty things if she would go with him. The police investigated this peddler and learned that he had been seen on the south side of the city twice more since that day, but despite their investigations, they are unable to locate him. It was known that children had been taken from some places and transported to cities where they were made to beg, and as the story of the peddler spread, people started to believe that this is what had happened to Maggie Thompson. However, despite the constant searching, it was as if Maggie had simply vanished. One reporter described her disappearance as though the earth had swallowed her. No real clue had yet been discovered, and as the police continued their investigation, the case began to be regarded as one of the most mysterious disappearances ever reported in Cleveland. After a week with no solid leads, and the growing public pressure, the police decided to question Mr. and Mrs. Thompson more thoroughly. Investigators had begun to consider every possibility, including the chance that someone within the household might know more than they had first admitted. The interviews were long and detailed, but despite the officers' efforts, nothing new emerged, and the couple's distress appeared genuine. Once again, the inquiry ended without any result. On Sunday the 9th of June, exactly 1 month since Maggie Thompson had gone missing, the residents of number 42 Merchant Avenue could no longer bear the dreadful smell that had been hanging about their house. For weeks it had been growing worse, and that night it became unbearable. The house belonged to Mr. Henry Luth, an elderly German carpenter who lived there with his wife and their 16-year-old son named Otto. At the rear of the property was a small apartment rented to Mr. Joseph Cheval, who lived there with his wife. That evening, Mrs. Luth, who had recently come home from hospital, urged her husband to find out what was causing the terrible smell. Mr. Luth agreed to go down into the cellar, and his wife held a lantern from the doorway. There were 2 low, narrow cellars beneath the house, and Mr. Luth had decided to check them both. First, he crawled into the smaller one, and after a few minutes he emerged. He was pale and shaking, his eyes wide with horror. "Well, what have you found?" his wife asked him in German. Mr. Luth replied that there was a body under the house. Mrs. Luth ran out into the streets and called to Constable Steen, who had happened to be passing by on his beats. When he saw the opening to the cellar, he realised he could not fit through himself, so asked Mr. Luth to go back inside and bring out what he had found. Mr. Luth did as he was asked and pulled the body out towards a window. It was the body of a young girl. It had been dismembered and was already in a state of decomposition. Police headquarters were notified at once, and within minutes, Captain Gates, Detective Douglas, Lieutenant English, and several other officers, along with the coroner, Mr. Walsh, arrived at 42 Merchant Avenue. But they were not the first. News of the discovery had already spread quickly throughout the neighbourhoods, and by the time the officials had reached the house, the street was crowded with onlookers. In less than 10 minutes, nearly 200 people had gathered outside, murmuring in shock and disbelief as officers began their investigation. Clothing found next to the body seemed to match the clothes that Maggie had been wearing when she disappeared. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were notified, and Mr. Thompson immediately came to the house, but was not permitted to go where the body had been found. He was shown a hat that had been found and asked if he recognised it. As he looked at it, he became very emotional, threw his hands up in the air and cried out, "My God, it's my child." He then tried to break away from the officers and force his way into the cellar. 3 officers managed to hold him back, but it was obvious to everyone that he was a man that had been driven by grief. By this time the crowd outside were already agitated and began to shout threats against the occupants. But when Mr. Thompson cried out several times, "Lynch the murderer," the cry was taken up by everyone, and for a moment it seemed that the crowd may push themselves into the property. Officers managed to push them back and continued to try and restrain Mr. Thompson, who was still attempting to get into the cellar. All the occupants of number 42 Merchant Avenue were taken into custody and brought to the 9th Precinct Station. The police believe that someone among them must know something about the crime, since the body could only have been placed where it was found by entering through one of their cellars. When Mr. Thompson was asked if he knew the residents of the house, he replied that he had never met or spoken to anyone there and had had no reason to suspect them. When officers questioned the neighbours, they described the Luth family as a quiet and respectable German family with 2 children, one who still lived at home and one who had moved out. However, no one knew anything about Mr. and Mrs. Shevel. All 5 of the occupants were placed under police guard while the investigation continued. Mr. Luth told officers that he was a carpenter by trade and had been working since January in the city of Fremont, about 85 miles from Cleveland. He said that during that time, he had returned home only once, until a week ago, when he came back for good. He added that he soon learned of complaints from his tenants about the terrible smell in the house, and by the Sunday, the smell had become so unbearable that he and his wife decided to go down into the cellar to investigate. He added that there were 2 cellars under the house, both of which had been checked several times before by others, but Mr. Luth said that as he was quite small, he was able to crawl into one of them, while his wife, who had only recently been discharged from hospital, held a light for him. Mr. and Mrs. Shevel said that they had never been down into the cellar, but had requested that their landlord find out where the terrible smell was coming from. The tenants at the rear of the house, Mr. Joseph and Mrs. Clarissa Shevel, had lived there since the previous October. They were both around 40 years old, but had only been married since the previous autumn. Mr. Shevel told them that he had first noticed the terrible smell about 3 weeks earlier, but at first thought little of it and had gradually become accustomed to it. He explained that he often worked late and was usually too tired when he came home to pay much attention. However, he added that the day before the discovery, he finally complained to his landlord, Mr. Luth, about the persistent smell. As the police tried to work out who had killed the 7-year-old little girl, they turned their attention to Mr. and Mrs. Luth's 16-year-old son named Otto. He worked in a cigar shop at 270 Viaduct, and during his father's absence in Fremont, and while his mother was in hospital, he had lived with his brother John at 75 Hamburg Street, but had moved back in with his parents on the 1st of June. Otto told officers that during the time he lived with his brother, he would frequently visit his parents' house, just to see that everything was all right. He said that around the 16th of May, he began to notice the unpleasant smell, and added that his brother had also noticed it, and had told him to search to find out where it was coming from. Although Otto did reply to officers' questions, it was obvious that he was not saying very much, as if he had something he was trying to hide. However, after a time, he changed. His confidence broke, and although he had initially denied any involvement in a murder, he later confessed and signed a written statement. He told officers that at around 11:30 on the day that Maggie Thompson disappeared, he was standing at the gate of his home near the corner of Fairfield and Merchant Avenue. He said that Maggie passed by on her way home from school and in a friendly, childish way asked if he had any buttons that she could have for her collection. Otto said that he replied, "Come with me and I'll give you some." He said that she followed him without hesitation into the bedroom of the house, and once inside, he suddenly seized her, threw her onto the bed, and despite her cries and struggles, he assaulted her. He said that he then became overwhelmed by fear and the consequences of what he had done, so he grabbed a hammer that lay nearby and struck her on the head. He went on to say that he then removed her clothing, wrapped the body in bedclothes, and left it lying on the bed. He said that he left it there for 6 days, from the Thursday until the following Wednesday, as his father was out working in Fremont and his mother was in hospital. He said that no one entered the house during that time, and on the Wednesday, he took the body from the bed, wrapped it in some coverings, and dragged it down to the cellar. After signing the confession, Otto appeared completely crushed. It was as if he now fully grasped the enormity of his situation, and over he kept on murmuring, "Oh, my dear mother." Otto Luth was then formally arrested and charged with murder. Tragedy continued to strike the Thompson family when on the 7th of September, Maggie's father, Mr. Jacob Thompson, was gravely injured at work after being run down by a switch engine. The trial of Otto Luth was scheduled to begin on Monday the 21st of October 1889 before Judge Solders. However, due to an illness affecting Mrs. Thompson, the mother of the deceased girl, and the difficulty of selecting an impartial jury for such a shocking and widely publicised case, testimony did not commence until Monday the 9th of December. Otto Luth was represented by Mr. W.S. Kerowish, while the prosecution was conducted by Prosecutor Hayden. Many people wanted to see the proceedings, and there was a large crowd outside the courthouse. Inside, the gallery was restless, so Judge Solders had to ask Sheriff Sawyer and Deputy Sheriff Goldstell to make sure that they kept all the spectators in order. Although Otto had already confessed to the murder, he entered a plea of not guilty. His attorneys argued that the confession he had given to the police should not be allowed as evidence, claiming that he had not made it voluntarily. They maintained that Otto had been frightened, confused, and too young to fully understand what he was saying or the seriousness of the situation. On hearing arguments from both sides, Judge Solders ruled that the confessions would remain in evidence, leaving it to the jury to decide how much weight they should carry, and whether the statement reflected a true admission of guilt or was the result of fear and pressure during questioning. Many witnesses described how little Maggie Thompson had left school that day and was seen walking home along Fairfield Street and Merchant Avenue. Neighbours said that they had seen her along the routes, and local shopkeepers all gave accounts of her movements and said that she seemed particularly cheerful. Mr. Henry Luth testified that he discovered her body in the cellar as he had gone there to investigate a terrible smell that had troubled the house. Police officers spoke of the scene and explained how all the occupants were arrested and taken to the 9th Precinct station. There were expert medical witnesses, including the coroner, Mr. Walsh, who provided details about the condition of the body and the cause of the death. Mrs. Eva Baker testified that she had done the washing for the Luth family for about 5 years, and as she was preparing for Mr. Luth to return from Fremont and Mrs. Luth to return from hospital, she went to the house to see if everything was in order. She went into one of the rooms, where she saw a mattress that was stained and crawling with worms. She told the court that she couldn't believe what she had seen, and immediately went and spoke to Otto and asked him what he had done, to which he replied, "I haven't done anything." She said that she showed him the mattress and told him that Mrs. Cheval hadn't been able to eat for 3 days because of the smell and that he must immediately attend to it. She said that the next day she returned to the house and noticed that he had cleaned the mattress and put it in a corner. The defence argued that Otto suffered from epilepsy, a condition that ran in his family. His mother testified that she had come to the United States from Germany with her parents in 1864 and said that although she had one surviving sister, her parents had lost 4 other children in Germany. She stated that both she and her mother suffered from epilepsy and that Otto had inherited the same condition. The defence called several medical witnesses. They were asked to explain to the jury the nature of epilepsy and to give their opinion as to whether it could be regarded as a form of insanity. At the time, epilepsy was poorly understood and often considered to be a kind of mental disorder rather than a disease of the nerves. It was widely believed that epileptic fits could leave a person temporarily insane or unaware of their actions. The defence hoped that the jury would see Otto's illness as evidence that he had not been fully responsible for what he had done. The prosecution, however, countered this by arguing that there was no evidence that Otto had had an epileptic seizure at the point of the crime, and that his actions before, during and after the murder showed careful planning and awareness, not for confusion or loss of control associated with epilepsy. Though the majority of Cleveland's residents were convinced of Otto's guilt, and the case dominated conversations in shops and along the streets, some wondered if the boy's actions might have been influenced by a medical condition which ran in his family and could have affected his mind and behaviour. However, these few voices of compassion were cautious, often quickly drowned out by the anger and horror of others. But the city did have those who, although shocked by the crime, had some sympathy for the boy's condition. On the 29th of December, the prosecution and defence summed up their cases. The prosecution stressed the brutality of the crime, Otto's detailed confession, and the clear evidence linking him to the murder. The defence argued that Otto suffered from epilepsy, which ran in his family, and urged the jury to consider his youth and this medical condition when weighing up his guilt. After 6 hours of tense deliberation, the jury returned with its verdict. Otto Luth was found guilty of first-degree murder. Following this, Judge Solders sentenced him to death and announced that he would be hanged on the 16th of April. The courtroom erupted in anguish, and Otto's mother, overcome by grief, started shouting in German. The murder of little Maggie Thompson was widely regarded as one of the most shocking and brutal crimes in Ohio's history, yet many people hesitated at the idea of executing a teenage boy, particularly one who suffered from epilepsy, a condition thought by some to affect the mind and behaviour. In the days that followed, Otto's defence team filed an appeal requesting a new trial and a stay of execution. The court granted a temporary reprieve, giving them time to present their arguments. However, when the Court of Appeal and Ohio Supreme Court refused to overturn the verdict, another stay of execution was arranged until the 29th of August, which allowed the attorneys to petition the Board of Pardons. This attempt also failed, and a final appeal was made directly to Governor Campbell, but he also denied to overturn the verdict and grant clemency. Despite the repeated legal efforts and public debate over executing a teenager with a medical condition, the sentence remained in place. On the 29th of August 1890, Otto Luth was hanged. The following day, his body was returned to his parents for burial. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case.